The Book of Psalms. The Book of Psalms, also known in Hebrew as the Book of Tehilim. Now there is the Tanakh, known as the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the scriptures, known as Tanakh. Tanakh is the acronym for the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, which is the Torah, the prophets, and the scriptures. This is what we know as the Torah. The Torah was given to Moses on Mount Sinai after he spent 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain and came down and presented us the 10 Commandments and the whole Torah, which is known as the 5 books of Moses as we know it. From all of these great books, there is one particular book that's called the Psalms. This particular book has a unique power more than all the other books in one sense. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to share with you the power of the Book of Psalms and what that can mean to you and what it can do for you. So who wrote the Book of Psalms? The common author of the Book of Psalms is known to be King David. King David, who conquered Israel, that he was the one who wrote the Book of Psalms. Well, that is partially correct. At the end of the day, the Book of Psalms is attributed to King David because he finished it off, he compiled it, and he taught it to us. However, the Book of Psalms dates back way before King David. Now, many people wonder, how old is the prayer book? How long has the prayer book been around? Well, the prayer book that we have today, that the Jewish people pray from 3 times a day and other holidays, dates back some 1500 years maybe. So begs the question, what did the Jewish people do before then? How did they pray? What did they do when they came together for the high holidays or Saturdays? What did they pray from? If there was no prayer book, then what is it that they prayed with? It's a question that we don't ponder too often, because we grew up with the prayer book and we assume that it's been around forever. In reality, the prayer book is just 1500 years old. What we used before them was the Book of Psalms. Yes, that was the common prayer book that we used anytime we got together as a congregation. That's what we prayed from. So the Book of Psalms predated the prayer book. So who authored the Book of Psalms? So the Book of Psalms was actually authored by many authors. As when you do read through the Book of Psalms, you would see various chapters are attributed to the various authors. The very first contributor to the Book of Psalms is dated back to Adam. Yes, the very first human being created by God, when God blew in a soul of life into Adam. And then came Eve and the rest of us. So Adam was the first contributor to the Book of Psalms. And then it began accumulating the various authors throughout the days of Moses and throughout the days of the Bible. Even the children of the rebellion Korach wrote Psalms because they repented. Various prophets. Psalms consists of 150 chapters. So I want to share with you the power of Psalms. When you study Torah, the studying of the Torah connects you with God in a very special way, in a very internal, personal way. When you read the prophets, you're connecting with our history. When you read scriptures, you understand the journey of those who preceded us. But there's something unique about the book of Psalms. The book of Psalms is not only a form of studying, but it's rather a form of praying. None of the other books is referred to as a book of prayer. And that is the book of Psalms. Its words were composed with what's known as divine inspiration. The words at times may be repetitive, and it's a very different Hebrew than the other books were written in. That is because these words were written with divine inspiration, which means that every single word in the book of Psalms has a specific power and energy coming from God in heaven. And as we utter those words, it has a special journey that pierces the gates of heaven more than anything else. And throughout all history, the book of Psalms was the go-to book that whenever there was a calamity, whenever we needed extra help from heaven, whenever we had nowhere else where to turn, you grab the book of Psalms and you begin reading. The rest of the Torah, when you study it, you need to absorb it, you need to understand it at some level. There are so many different levels to understand Torah, but it's required us to use our intellect to understand what the Torah is teaching us. But the book of Psalms requires zero intellectual energy. This rather is a prayer. The only requirement is to read the words, to utter the words with our lips, with our hearts, and with prayer, with passion. Those are the words of the Psalms that were written with divine inspiration, and you get to repeat those words. The book of Psalms, its power, its energy, its effectiveness has been a commonplace for the Jewish world from all time till this very day. The book of Psalms is still the go-to book that we take with us. When our wife is going into the hospital to give birth to a child, we pack everything up. We also take a book of Psalms because we need to invoke great prayer from God so everything should go well. When there is an upcoming surgery or any other health procedure, we take the book of Psalms and we say some verses to elicit and to bring down prayer from heaven. In the early days of the Holocaust, when the dark cloud of this horrific, worst event of all history has occurred. The sixth Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, has elicited by all of his followers to spread the word throughout the world. To the least that we can do to help our brothers and sisters who are being slaughtered by the millions in Europe is to take the book of Psalms and every single day to read several chapters. As a matter of fact, the book of Psalms has been divided up into 30 days of the month. So we take the 150 chapters, and every day we say a group of those chapters. So by every month, we have completed the whole book of Psalms. This, the Rebbe was saying, is what we in America could do to help our brothers and sisters who are suffering in Europe. This tradition stands till today. Right after morning prayers, we all grab the book of Psalms and we say a few chapters. On a very personal level, the effect of the book of Psalms is not just globally, but individually as well. When we have our birthday, we open up the book of Psalms and we read the chapter that corresponds to our personal own birthday coming year. So if you just turned 30, then you would begin reciting chapter 31. And you do that every single day until your next birthday. Then you begin reading 32. This is how powerful and integral part of our existence is the book of Psalms. To understand that this is one book that when you open it up and you read from it, angels are created with those words. And those angels carry the words up to heaven and accomplish what you need to accomplish. There's no other parallel book that has the energy and the power of reading Psalms. This is fundamental, this is critical, and this is attainable. Each one of us can do this. You can pick up a book of Psalms and today begin reading, because the world is facing many calamities. The world seems to be wobbling and shaking every day with another frightening, terrifying event happening. So we need to invoke prayers from God. We need to invoke as much as we can from heaven. And that can be done through the reading from the book of Psalms. I want to share with you a interesting story that came my way about the power of the book of Psalms. And this was about two elderly Jewish women who were rooming together at a nursing home towards their sunset of life. One woman, her name was Esther. She kept a traditional home, followed the Jewish traditions. Her roommate, Sadie, although she grew up in her home traditional, but her husband and her only child did not follow in traditional Judaism. Esther would always tell Sadie that this is a conversation that happens in nursing homes, that in Jewish tradition, when a person passes away, they could only be buried in the ground. In other words, cremation is a desecration to the Jewish body and is totally prohibited in Jewish law, because the body is not really ours. It's on loan from God. And God told us that when we finish with the body, it needs to be returned to Him. We came from earth, we return to earth. That's the only way we can be returned. Especially coming from the Holocaust, where so many millions of our brothers and sisters were cremated. Cremation voluntarily in our generation should never happen. Sadie began sobbing and saying, my husband is long gone. My only son is not religious. And he tells me he's going to cremate me. And it's lying so heavy on me, Sadie is saying. She doesn't know what to do. So Esther gave Sadie the book of Psalms and says, read a psalm every day, and God will help you. And so Sadie, who grew up knowing Hebrew, began reciting psalms every single day. Her son would come very infrequent to visit her. Whenever he came, he saw her reading from the book of Psalms, and he'd say, why are you reading this? And she would say, because I want to be buried in the ground. I don't want to be cremated. But nothing she said was able to change her son's mind. Time went on. In the middle of the night, Esther's family receives a phone call from the nursing home that Esther has finally passed away. Esther's family were devastated, although expecting it. She lived her ripe old age, called a rabbi, called the funeral home, the burial society. They picked up Esther's body and they scheduled a funeral. The rabbi came to the funeral, gave over a eulogy, and after the funeral, they recited one of the most sacred prayers, the memorial prayer known as Kaddish. This is a prayer that's so sacred because it connects heaven and earth. When a parent passes away, when a loved one passes away, these are the words that connects us, that keeps them alive for us. And Sadie wanted so much that when she dies, that she could have such a service, that she could as well have Kaddish said for her. But her son wouldn't hear from it. But because Esther, her husband and family were traditional, she was able to enjoy her wishes of having a traditional burial and the Kaddish prayer said for her. So Esther's family went home, and what happens is when a Jewish person passes away after the funeral, we spend 7 days of mourning. It's called Shiva. Shiva is the Hebrew word of 7. 7 days of mourning. What happens during these 7 days, the family does not leave the home, the immediate family, which are the siblings, the children, and the spouse, and they stay home together, and they spend 7 days talking about the deceased, and neighbors and friends and congregants come to pay what's called a Shiva call, condolences. So Esther's home was filled with members of the congregation. The rabbi was there. 3 days into the Shiva, as people were drinking and eating, the phone rings. And someone answers the phone and gives it to Esther's son. He takes the phone, says hello. He turns pale and he faints. Someone else grabbed the phone as they were carrying to the son, say hello. He says, yeah, this is Esther. The other person says, excuse me? This is Esther. Esther, where are you calling from? He says, what do you mean, where am I calling from? Where's my son? He gets out of his faint and he grabs the phone. He says, "Mom, where are you calling from? Where are you?" Couldn't figure out. Esther says, "What do you mean?" His son says, "You're dead." She says, "I'm not dead." She says, "We just got back from your funeral a few days ago." She says, "I was wondering why you haven't visited me in 3 days." He says, "What do you mean visit you? We buried you." She says, "Honey, I'm very alive. I never died." And he says, "What do you mean you never died? We just did your funeral. We did your eulogy. We said Kaddish. We're now sitting Shiva for you." He says, "What are you talking about? I'm alive." He says, "The nursing home called and told us you died." He says, "No, that wasn't me. That was Sadie. Sadie died. I'm fine." And now the family is totally taken aback. The nursing home seemingly made a colossal mistake. They called the wrong family to say that the wrong person passed away. Apparently the nursing staff got the beds mixed up. You could only imagine what a pandemonium has occurred in the Shiva house. When the rabbi is summoned, "Rabbi, what do we do here? We just did a funeral, we just buried Esther, and we said Kaddish, and we're sitting Shiva, but she's really alive." They reach out to the nursing home to verify that indeed a colossal mix-up has been made. Now the rabbi and the family are sitting with the nursing home director. How do we go about this? How do we deal with this? And who's going to call Sadie's son to tell him of this colossal mistake? And Sadie's son wasn't from the kindest, as we know, and who knows, he's probably going to sue the nursing home, and the legal battles. This is going to be a disaster. When the rabbi came in and said, "Nothing that happens by accident. Everything happens for a purpose and for a reason." They reach out to the son, and in the most gentle way, they explain to the son, "We are so sorry to tell you that your mother passed away." He says, "Oh, I knew this day was coming. Well, you know what to do. Don't worry about it. Just send it to the cremation and have it cremated. Everything is fine." Then the rabbi gets on and says, "Let me share with you something that just happened. It may sound like a colossal mistake, but this seems to be a divine response to your mother's prayers." He said, "You see, when you came to visit her, she was holding the book of Psalms. You know what she was praying for?" He said, "Yeah, she wanted to have a traditional Jewish funeral. She wanted to be buried in the ground, and she wanted to have a plain pine coffin and buried in shrouds, white shrouds, and she wanted a rabbi to do a eulogy, and she wanted the Kaddish prayer to recite it, and she wants us to sit Shiva for her." So no, that wasn't going to happen. That's not happening. I mean, we're not religious. It doesn't mean anything to us, so we're just going to cremate her. The rabbi says, "Let me explain to you what just happened. 3 days ago when your mother died, when your mother passed away, it may have seemed to be a mistake from the nursing home, but the divine hand had it that your mother's wishes should become true. She was indeed buried in shrouds, in a plain pine coffin. A rabbi gave a eulogy, Kaddish was said, and even Shiva was observed." He says, "How could that be?" He says, "Well, it was a mix-up. But you know what? It was because of your mother wanted that so much." And the son said, "Whatever," and parted ways. When I heard this story, what took me was the power of reading the book of Psalms. Sadie every day used the book of Psalms. That's all she knew, was how to read Hebrew. Her only wishes were to have a proper Jewish burial. And look what happened. Look how the heavens interceded to create this chain of events just so she could be buried the way she wanted. And Esther continued on living her life to her end, and eventually her family had to bury her and redo everything that they did for Sadie, they did for her. But the story is fascinating, it's so beautiful, teaching us and helping us understand this is the power of the book of Psalms. So, to me, this teaches me that if I don't know anything else, if I don't know how to study, I don't know how to learn, I didn't grow up with much Judaism, I don't know, I never spoke to God, I don't know how to talk to God, I don't know how to pray. What you could do is take a book of Psalms and begin reading it. You will see, undoubtedly, how heavens will do whatever it takes to respond to your needs and your requests. As a matter of fact, I recite the book of Psalms every day, several chapters, including my own, my wife, and my children and grandchildren's chapters. Once a month, I also read the whole book. Once every Hebrew month, before the new Hebrew month, I recite the whole book. And to me, it's kind of a way of saying goodbye to the last month and praying to God for success for the coming month. The power of Psalms continues. King David takes our prayers as we say it, and he assists us in accomplishing what we need to accomplish. This is the power of Tehilim. This is the power of the book of Psalms. Don't just wait to an emergency to rip out the book and begin reading. Make it a regular, perfunctory act, as a regular part of your daily routine. Read one psalm a day, and that will certainly give you the success and the prayers and the blessings you need. Let's pray together. Let's hold hands and salute the most powerful prayer book of all time, the book of Psalms. God will answer your prayers. God bless you. God loves you.